In this next section, we're going to be talking about ethics and boundary issues in counseling, specifically related to pre-employment transition services. So when we talk about boundary issues, we really mean dual or multiple relationships. Usually that's what we're talking about when we're talking about boundary issues. And there are a couple of applicable sections of the CRCC Code of Ethics, that being A4 and A5. And really, when we're thinking about dual relationships, we are thinking about either relationships that happen simultaneously with our clients, meaning it just is a natural progression into a dual relationship, or a family member of our client, or somebody that our client is related to, or maybe it happens outside of our counseling relationship unexpectedly. So questions to consider that we will kind of talk through in this part of the module and recording are dual relationships completely unavoidable? And if they were, we wouldn't be talking about them, right? So in our profession, it is not possible to completely avoid dual relationships. However, we need to be aware of what to do whenever we are faced with a situation where we are being put into a dual relationship, or if we see something coming our way where there might be a boundary crossing or a boundary violation specifically, and what to do when these issues arise. Are dual relationships easily spotted? Sometimes they are, and sometimes they just aren't. You know, it may be that a client walks into our office and right away we recognize who they are, or we may catch it before a client comes to our office, or before we have that initial meeting, and we can say, no, I have a previous relationship with this client, or somebody closely related to the client, and then you don't have to be so concerned about that dual relationship. But sometimes they aren't easily spotted, meaning that we might have that established counseling relationship with our client. Maybe we've seen a client a couple of times, we have started working with them, and then we discover later on that there is a dual relationship. There is somebody, a third party maybe, that is a friend of the client but also a friend of ours, and we just weren't aware of that in the beginning. Aren't we supposed to establish a relationship with our client? Absolutely. We are trained as counselors to, from the very start of our time that we meet with our clients, from the intake on, we are supposed to establish and continue to develop an appropriate therapeutic relationship with our clients. So that's where these dual relationships and boundary issues come into play. Where do we draw a line? And in that therapeutic relationship, we often have, this kind of sweet spot right in the middle, where we are just as involved as we should be in our clients' lives, but not under-involved and not over-involved. And whenever we start to sway from one side of the spectrum to the other, where we are getting over-involved in the client's life, we're doing more than maybe we should be, maybe we are doing that tried and true, serving our clients and helping them to achieve their goals, but we end up working harder and we're more invested in the relationship than maybe our clients are. We're bleeding over into that over-involved area. And then being under-involved in that therapeutic relationship can equally have ethical boundary issues that come into play as well, if we are not upholding those ethical principles that we are charged to uphold, because we are concerned or not sure of how to mitigate some of those boundary issues that exist. Therapeutic boundaries look different for everyone. We all practice in our own unique and different ways. We should be doing that, right? We all are individual human beings as counselors, and so we have our different ways of approaching our clients, and those that are also assisting our clients in the pre-ETS world. So there are things that we can consider when it comes to those therapeutic boundaries and what they might look like. For one, it's our theoretical orientation. I have a picture on this slide of Dr. Carl Rogers, who we all know, a humanistic counselor, and he really valued that unconditional positive regard, non-judgmental attitude and approaches towards counseling. And in this picture that is shown, he's sitting face to face with a client, and relatively near to his client as well. And so we talk about, when it comes to physical boundaries, maintaining appropriate physical boundaries and maintaining appropriate nonverbal and verbal behaviors with our clients. But Carl Rogers often would get very close to his clients, and that was part of what he did in that theoretical orientation. Culture is really important. Culture oftentimes determines how we approach others, how we maybe say hello, how we greet others that are next to us, whether it be shaking hands or not shaking hands, eye contact, again, physical contact in general. Culture makes a big difference in what these boundaries might look like. Population served and developmental stages of client are really important in the world of pre-eds because we are working with adolescents, we are working with individuals that may need some guidance on what appropriate boundaries look like for this type of relationship. Our clients may not have had a therapeutic relationship in the past, or may not have been taught what might look like an appropriate boundary with a counselor. And so therefore we might need to take that additional time to kind of step outside of our role as counselor and put on that educator hat for our clients so that they're aware of what these boundaries might look like. Both real physical boundaries, again, and also the other types of boundaries that we must maintain, those relationship type boundaries. So ethics in action, and in terms of boundary issues when it comes to working with clients, there are certain things that our counseling ethical codes tell us are very black and white areas, right? So no, we are absolutely not to have any kind of sexual or romantic relationship with our current clients, partners, and family. In the world of pre-eds, this is, of course, utmost importance because of the age of our clients and legal issues that would understandably come into play. But when we're thinking about past clients as well, it's important to note that no, those relationships should not be extended to former clients either. Friends, family, and personal relationships, again, the boundary lines are very clear. No, we should not be providing services to those who you have been intimate with in the past. And if you cannot be objective in terms of family or friends or personal relationships that you've had in the past. But how can we gauge this? How do we know if we're able to be objective or not? Again, we usually get into our counseling relationships because we want to help others and we're not intending to harm others. But if we get into those relationships thinking that we are the best person for that individual, even though we have a pre-existing relationship in some form with them, even if we think we might be able to be objective, we have to be very, very cautious about that and be realistic in what our boundaries are. In terms of non-professional relationships, relationships with former clients and their family, if you knew a client previously and they're now back on your caseload, you have to consider those risks and benefits of working with that client. And working through an ethical decision-making model can really help someone determine whether or not they should proceed with that counseling relationship. And if past client or current client, again, consider risks and benefits. If there's somebody that they know that you also know, if they're a current client, you have to just weigh out what the options might be. There are some circumstances that will kind of be those areas where it's more likely that you'll have or see these unavoidable dual relationships pop up. In rural communities, military settings, in addictions counseling settings, pastoral counseling, and working with specific populations, highlighting, of course, here working with individuals with disabilities, but also feminist or multicultural counseling approaches, social justice approaches, LGBTQ populations. In these, working with specific populations, like in rural communities, in military settings, etc., it's more likely that there will be crossover, that you will know others in the community. In working with individuals with disabilities, there's oftentimes a lot of advocacy groups, a lot of support groups that are in one's community, and by kind of the natural way that we're supposed to be working as counselors, we should be involved at the community level. We should be engaged in these advocacy efforts. Not doing so might be, hurting our professional development. It could be, a way that we're able to connect with our community. It may be that we ourselves have family members, significant others, people that we know and care about that are involved in some of these efforts that are outside of the counseling room. And so therefore it puts puts us in those spaces where we may be unintentionally, again, developing these dual relationships with others that are also members of that same community. And again, in cases where there are these unavoidable boundary issues, it is more about determining what can be done, what should be done, and next steps, and making sure that we're informing our clients and parents and guardians of our clients of what that might look like, setting the boundaries from the very start of the relationship as best we can if there is a dual relationship present. Other specific boundary issues that can occur, bartering, so the exchange of goods for counseling services, social relationships. This extends to virtual relationships as well, business relationships, accepting gifts, self-disclosure, and physical contact. So these are some of those issues that can arise that can break down those boundaries that we might have set or previously set with our clients when it comes up. It may be that your client is asking you to share your story. How did you get into this profession? How do you, do you yourself have a disability? That's a question that is relatively common as rehab counselors that we get from our clients. So our clients often want to know a little bit about us that drew us to the profession. In working in pre-eds, the questions could be varied. Again, thinking about the population that you're working with and their ages, both physical ages and developmental ages as well. So wanting you to disclose about, what you're doing over the weekend, or what your thought is on what their career goals should be. So we have to be very careful about self-disclosure, again, ensuring that we are making the relationship about our client and not about ourselves. Again, physical contact, there may be some education that's needed that we have to provide to our clients in pre-eds, that we are informing them about what is appropriate and what might not be appropriate with the counseling relationship, as well as relationships that our clients might have out in the community and with potential employers as well. Accepting gifts, we're going to learn a little bit more about that and have some examples of what that can look like. There's not a set amount, there's not like a dollar amount. The codes of ethics say, yes, you can accept gifts up to this amount, and the code doesn't say that we need to, in every single case, say no to a gift. So again, that's where our professional judgment comes into play. What is the purpose of accepting the gift? What's the value of accepting the gift? What is there a cultural implication for the client bringing a gift to us, and what would happen if we decline the gift? How do we manage that type of discussion? How do we have that type of discussion? And getting a little bit deeper again into the social relationships, it's really important that we're monitoring our social media presence in every format that we might be using, again, because even if it's not intended, it may be that if we're really opening ourselves up on social media, that somebody is likely to friend us on a social media platform or follow our page or whatever it might be. And by way of that, we might be kind of extending those professional boundaries if that individual or somebody that is close to that individual, like a child, for example, is then needing to seek out pre-employment transition services. Now, crossings and violations are two different things. Some boundary crossings are okay, depending on the intent. Again, we're looking at what purpose would crossing a boundary serve for our client. Would it be doing good for our client versus doing harm? And so we have to think kind of, in steps here. If we do cross a boundary, what happens next? What could potentially happen in the future? And again, that's where these ethical decision-making models come into play and are really useful if we are taxed with looking at a boundary crossing and thinking about what kind of benefit it might have for our clients. Those decision-making models help guide us through each step. They remind us of the importance of consulting with our peers and our supervisors, and getting others' feedback on whether or not a boundary crossing would be something that would be okay depending on that particular situation. Not all crossings are violations, but crossing a boundary can be a slippery slope for sure. One common example of a boundary crossing is attending a graduation for a client. And, I always tell students of mine, if you're going to attend a graduation, think about the things that happen after that, and how you are going to address that with your client. Are you going to talk with your client? Is your client then going to introduce you to their family, or how will they introduce you to their family? Will they have family there? What happens if the family then extends an invitation to the post-graduation cookout? What will you say and what will you do at those points? So again, even with having that good intent to go and support a student at something like a graduation, again, that's just one example. It could lead to, that eventual boundary violation, again, unintentional, but still present. Crossing, again, a departure from practice that benefits the client. We want to make sure that we're always doing things to benefit the client, not for ourselves. A violation will cause harm. Again, most often it's not intended harm. We're not going out there and making decisions with the intent to harm our clients or their family members or their guardians, but it's the unintentional violations that end up doing harm. Steps to consider, to take if considering extending professional boundaries. Again, this is considering. I emphasize that word for a reason, that we're not, that we should not just automatically say, yeah, we're just going to go ahead and cross this boundary. We're not going to pay attention to the fact that there's a dual relationship present. We need to take that time as counselors to consider what might happen if we're going to extend a professional boundary. Again, using those ethical decision-making models to determine potential courses of action, which one is the best and which one you don't want to see happen. Consulting with your colleague, supervisors, both. Modifying informed consents or reinforcing parts of informed consents is incredibly important. A lot of times our agencies will determine for us what goes into an informed consent, but again, reminding our clients, especially in pre-eds, that there are reasons why that we won't be at certain events, or that we would not be outwardly greeting them if we saw them at the grocery store. And it's not intended to be hurtful or harmful. We just want to protect their privacy. We want to make sure that they feel comfortable, in the space with us in that counseling relationship. And making sure to document whenever any kind of question has come up, if a gift has been given, and maybe it is being given with good intent, and because of a cultural, there's a cultural aspect to the gift giving. Still, it's important to document that was happening and why it was accepted or declined if you're declining a gift. Steps to take if you decide to extend professional boundaries. So let's say that you have opted to go ahead and extend a professional boundary, determining that it's in the best interest of the client, that you're providing that individual care to the client, that their client's best interests are at the very, very top of the list. Make sure to use good communication skills. Again, keeping clients informed about what might happen, what could happen, even role playing a little bit. If you're, again, thinking about extension of a boundary or a dual relationship out in the community, what will that look like for your client? If they're going to be working a concession stand at a local basketball game, and you greet them and just say hello, but they get a little bit frustrated that you didn't say more, making sure to keep that line of communication open so that both of you and your client are on the same page moving forward and what that communication might look like. Ensuring that you're monitoring physical boundaries as well as emotional and psychological boundaries. So these are all important things to keep in mind, that we are always trying to protect both the physical and psychological boundaries that are present for both us as counselors and for our clients. And remember that the code of ethics is there for a reason. If we are in situations where we've gone through all the ethical decision-making steps based on the decision-making models, we've consulted with our peers, and we are still feeling a little bit stuck about something, remember that there's always consultations that can be had with individuals that are associated with our professional organizations, where they will provide feedback on specific parts of the code. I've done this before in the past, and it's been very useful. It's free service, so you might as well take advantage of it, but it's really useful to have somebody that is very knowledgeable about these codes of ethics, highlighting key areas that are important to consider for you as the counselor as you make ethical decisions in your practice. And finally, kind of taking it back to the practical considerations. What can we do in those moments whenever we have a boundary issue that's presented unexpectedly in front of us? We have to consider, will extending the boundary benefit me in any way? Will it benefit me to go to a march on my main street for this activist cause? You know, is that benefiting solely me? Do I think it will look good to post myself on social media, you know, marching down the street? Or will it, you know, really be a benefit to the population that I'm serving? I'm not doing it for the likes for myself. I'm doing it for my clients and their families, and to support you know, the community, and to advocate for my clients and with my clients. Will extending the boundaries set me up for a problem later? So again, having that foresight to think, you know, what if I do extend this boundary? What if I do communicate with my client in this way outside of the professional environment? What could happen next? Can I remain objective, practice competently, and adhere to all ethical principles? A lot of questions in this third practical consideration, but at the same time we have to be really conscious of ourselves and what we know about who we are and our boundaries, and what crossing a boundary might look like for us, what it might mean to us. Do we need to have a little bit more education in this area? Do we need a refresher in terms of our ethics and our codes of ethics? Has it been updated like it recently has? Do we need to go back to our code of ethics and look to see if something new has been added? I say that because one of the things that has newly been added in the updated code of ethics is a lot about the virtual presence in social media. And so it is important to go back and review the latest and greatest updates to our codes of ethics. And do I have an option to refer? I put this as my last practical consideration because I don't ever want it to be something that is in the forefront of our minds, that if we run into these difficult situations, these tough situations that we don't know how to get past, that our first thought is, I'm just going to refer to somebody else. That may not be the best option for our clients. We may actually be the best person to see our clients in that particular situation, and so there might be other ways to work around these boundary issues. Or there may simply not be somebody else to refer to. That happens in when working with some of those, in those specific populations. If we're working in a rural community, there might be a very limited number of trained counselors that work in pre-eds. And so it may be that we need to determine other ways to address some of the boundary issues of the dual relationship, so that we can confidently and competently and ethically continue to work with our clients versus referring.